Lewis heard his father's voice barking at him, but he didn't turn back to obey his instructions. Instead, he continued to walk, away from the tenements and out toward the old furnaces, where they'd been cold for years now, since Lewis was just a small boy. But the mountains of gray ash and that furnaces had produced during their many years of relentlessness, roaring life still covered the ground all around them. It tainted everything. Within 100 miles, it blew into the tenements and got into the food the people ate there, into their eyes too, and their beds. It made their shit gray, their skins gray, and the whites of their eyes gray. Lewis hated the ash, but not as much as he hated his family. Them he hated with as much fury as his heart could muster. His father and mother, his two sisters, and his older brother. They were his enemies. I wish they were dead. I wish they were dead, he said to himself as he trudged toward the furnaces. With every step a cloud of gray dust erupted around his feet. He would get worse with the closer the furnaces he ventured, but he didn't care. The more distance he put between himself and his family, the happier he'd be. Night was falling. It was getting cold, so he was pleased to see a bonfire burning in the gloom ahead of him. He headed toward it. There was no sign of the fire's owner in its vicinity, but it looked to have been recently fed, because the flames were rising 10 or 12 feet high into the air. Lewis approached the fire and warmed himself. He was a scrawny kid, and he was used to being cold. His father kept the tenement like an icebox, always claiming that they didn't have the money to pay large bills, but that didn't stop him from gambling every day at the dogfights. "I'm never going back there," Lewis muttered. I'd rather die. "You shouldn't talk to yourself," said a voice from the far side of the fire. "Folks will think you're crazy. They'll lock you up and throw away the key." Lewis peered through the flames, but they were too intense for him to see the man who was addressing him. So he wandered around the fire. The man was sitting on the ground, leaning back against a substantial pile of timbers, more fuel for the fire. But this man was certainly not the one who collected the wood, for he had no arms. There were not even stumps. "What are you staring at?" "Your arms." "I don't have none, boy," the man replied. "No, I see." "Can't see something I ain't got." And then, seeing the nervous look on Lewis's face, he started laughing. "Ha ha ha ha! I'm joking with you, you little shrimp. Come here, sit down. I ain't gonna strangle you. Might stomp you to death." Again an outburst of laughter. "Ha ha 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 ha! Nah, I won't do that neither. Sit. I'm Nefer, the coffin maker." "Who the hell are you?" "I'm Lewis." "Pleased to make your acquaintance, Lewis. Where do you live?" "Why do you want to know?" "I plan to go there and murder your family. What do you think?" "No, kid. Just making conversation is all." "I live in the tenements." "You're a long way from home." "Can't be far enough for me." "I know how you feel. Who needs those people?" "I got company here. Not much, but it's enough." "I don't see anybody." "Gregget," Nefer said. "Show yourself." Lewis sensed a movement in the shadows behind the armless man, and a figure loomed into view. His head bestial, his hands huge and surely capable of murder. Who's this?" "My only friend, my creature, Gregget." "What do you mean, your creature?" "He made me," the beast man said. "Made you? How?" Gregget shook his huge head. Nefer couldn't see this of his companion, but he knew what he was doing. "He can't tell you how he was made because he wasn't there, but I'll tell you. Gregget, feed the fire." The creature dragged his heavy frame over the pile of timbers and picked up several blocks of wood, loaded them onto his shoulder, and carried them over to the fire, where he dumped them into the flames. It was a prodigious show of strength. "Where did you find him?" Lewis wanted to know. "I didn't find him," the armless man replied. "I told you, I made him." "I don't understand." "He's a golem, lad." Lewis looked at the man blankly. "You don't know what a golem is?" "No, I don't." "It's a creature raised out of the dirt by magic. I shaped the thing from the very ash between our feet. And then I mixed it with some of my blood and some of my spit, and I wrote the name of Jehovah upon it to put the spirit of life into it. Now it serves my every need. Don't you, Gregor? Yes, sir. Nor do I have to feed it or give it time to sleep. It doesn't sleep? No. It lives to serve me night and day. And it will do so until his life force fails it. Then what? I'll make another. Lewis laughed. That's just a stupid joke, he said. I have no arms. You have no arms. How could you make such a thing? You'd be surprised, he said, raising his feet in front of his face, paring the toes with one knife held on the other. It was an impressive display. Believe me, he's my handiwork, the man said. Every inch of him, it took a lot of sweat and patience, but it was worth it. My life without him would be immeasurably harder. Could you teach me? Lewis said. How to make a golem? For myself. Nefer stared at him, with a small smile playing on his lips. Why else are you here? The armless man replied. Fate brought you here so that you can learn from me. The lesson in golem making took almost 3 weeks. Every day Lewis made his way from the tenement to the old furnaces, and every day the armless man gave his secrets, words and signs and ceremonies. Needless to say, Lewis' constant departures from his home and the filthy state in which he returned did not go unnoticed. His father asked questions, and when they were unanswered with shrugs, Lewis got several beatings. But the bruises did not dissuade him. He went to see Nefer and learned his lessons like a good student until, at last, the armless man said, Tomorrow will be our last day, Lewis. You mean I'll be ready? You'll be ready. The next day he got to Nefer's little encampment. He found the armless man had gone, and so that the golem Gregor, the blackened pot in which Gregor had cooked rat stew had gone, along with the filthy bedding on which Nefer slept. All that was left was the ashes of the great bonfire that had first drawn Lewis to this place. Inscribed in those words, presumably by Nefer's foot, was one word: begin. That was what certainly Lewis did. He began by performing the ceremony of sanctification that Nectar had taught him. When he found himself in an old that Nefer had left upon his garbage, and he went to the furnaces to get rainwater to mix with ash, he added a bladder full of his own water so that the golem would have something of him in it, and his spit, too, and his sweat as he worked. It was hard labor, making enough mud to shape a full-sized man there in the ground, but Lewis was equal of the task. He worked through the high heat of the day and the cool of the evening. Then he lit a fire close by the place where the golem lay, and he continued to work by the light flickering flames. The heat of the bonfire began to dry the creature as he worked. Bitter steam rose from his form, stinging Lewis's eyes. He let his tears rise from his cheeks, and then let out some of the fluids, sweat, and split apart the golem stuff. Finally, he began to recite the words of life that Nefer the Armless had taught him, and he did so that he inscribed the name of the Creator on the brow of the creature. As he did so, he had his fist indication that the work he had done would bear fruit, as the letters of the Creator's name sank into the flesh of the creature and became invisible to the naked eye. Then when the words were said and the letters were written, he sat down in the dirt and allowed the fatigue to take over him. His eyes closed, and for what seemed like just a few moments, he drifted off into sleep. When he awoke, he knew an hour or more must have passed. However, the fire had burned much lower, and the night sky was starless black above. He turned to admire his golem, but it had gone. He scrambled to his feet, his heart beating fearfully. Where was it? He looked around, half afraid that the creature would pounce on him out of the darkness, but then his gaze caught sight of it, standing maybe 20 yards away, staring outward to the tenements. It had read its mind while asleep. Did it know what he wanted it to do? That's where we're going, he said to it. That's where my family lives, and I want you to kill my family. Kill them? The golem said. Its voice sounded like stone. Yes, and I want to see them all dead. You understand me? Yes, you want to see your family dead. Will you do this? You are my maker. I will do anything my master asks of me. They set out there and then, left the last of the fire to burn itself out, and headed back through the filthy dirt towards the outskirts of the city. Where they had gone to the apartment, it was dark in an hour of the night, when the moon had dropped from the sight of the sun had not risen yet, so the darkness is utter. The golem broke open the apartment door, and without waiting for any further instructions from its master, began from going to room to shed blood. It was terrifying, effectively terrifying. In a matter of moments, the job was almost complete. Lou's parents were murdered as they rose from their beds, their heads twisted from their necks and casually tossed aside. His brothers and sisters were next to go. Their slaughter, thankfully, quick, but still bloody, horribly bloody. At last it was done. Louis felt nothing, not satisfaction, not repulsion. "Let's get out of here," he said. "First you," the golem said. Louis thought for a moment that the golem was being polite, ushering him out of the house ahead. But then those huge hands he himself shaped, taking care of each with every finger, reached out for him and caught his head in their vice. "What are you doing?" he said. "You're of the family too," the golem said, and before his maker could contract this observation, Louis' skull cracked like an egg, spilling blood and thought and fragments of bone down over the golem's hands. It was purely by chance that Tom Rickham found the creature wandering in the streets of that city some nights later, and saw its brutal form and blood-stained skin making the profitable monster. He called him, for no better reason than he liked the name Elijah, and thought he was kind to the creature, the kinder than most others for some reason. The golem was never tamed from that day forth. It had killed its maker by its maker's instructions, as some have said man has done to God. And now, a brute forever hungry and vicious. Only sometimes, when the parade was moving on, the campfires of the night before being extinguished, ashes trickled over to the remains of the flames. Only did the golem occasionally show some tiny clue of profound feeling. It would watch the ashes wither, and the wind carry them away, and let out a low tender moan, as though it wished it could be unmade with similar ease and carried off into the nothingness.